Welcome back. This is part 3 of my series on Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses. In part 1, we talked about how there is a lack of narrative critique of toxic and bad behaviors in Maas's characters. In part 2, we talked about how Maas's reuse of ideas from other authors shows a lack of subtext in her own writing. And today I'm going to talk about how Maas's use of foreshadowing and plot holes also contribute to a lack of subtext in her writing, as well as discussing what Maas's own statements about her writing say about what she actually means when she's writing these characters. As before, spoiler warnings apply. If you haven't read at least A Court of Thorns and Roses, be aware that there will be some pretty major spoilers for that particular series. So Sarah J. Maas's foreshadowing is very obvious. The seraphim description in A Court of Wings and Ruin versus the angels in Crescent City, those are very, very, very similar. And it really, really hints to that being a crossover and some events in Crescent City and where that particular plot goes. One of the big things that just screams to me a very heavy-handed use of foreshadowing is the apple being poisoned with Fabane. It's a quick foreshadow. It's talking about something that's going to happen almost immediately after it's mentioned, but it is very hinted at. She spends a lot of time focusing on that apple and Feyre eating the apple, and then, oh, lo and behold, you find out the apple was poisoned. In that same sequence, Jurian was talking about knowing Rhys before the war, and it very much hints at him being a double agent, which is revealed later in the books. There's also hints for some things that haven't been revealed. It's being very heavily foreshadowed that Eris is not as evil as we think he is, that there's very much more to Eris and Mor's history than what we've been told thus far. So her use of foreshadowing it's just not subtle, really, at all. And that is not a good indication of very deep writing. Plot holes. There are a lot of plot holes in Maas's writing. And going back to our Rhys is the villain theory, I've heard a lot of people that talk about that theory say, well, all of these plot holes are indications that she is writing deeper, that she's eventually going to explain them. Except there's a lot that she hasn't explained over 4 books that she's had plenty of opportunity and would have been absolutely appropriate to explain. There's some smaller ones that are more just annoyances. The small one that really irritated me was the party in A Court of Mist and Fury. Now, this party took place in the House of Wind, and if you've read these series, you know that the House of Wind is only accessible via flight or climbing spiral staircase of 10,000 stairs. Now, in case you're wondering, the world's tallest spiral staircase is in the COTA building in Atlanta. It is 16 stories and it is just over 11,000 steps. I find it really hard to believe that all of the people that attended that party climbed 16 stories to get there. And I also have a hard time believing that Rhys, Cassian, and Azriel ferried all of these people up to the House of Winds just for this party. So how did all of these people get up there? One of the other smaller plot holes to me was that towards the end of the series, Feyre has a problem talking mentally to Rhys over long distances. When Feyre was at the Spring Court destroying it from within, yes, she was under the influence of Fabane, but she was still able to talk to Rhys even when he was still in the Night Court. So that is a huge distance in this particular land, and they were able to talk. Now, she did say that he kind of sounded muffled. It was a little bit harder to kind of get through to him, but they were able to talk. And then all of a sudden, at getting closer to the end of the series and in the war, the distances start to be a problem. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. There's twists that kind of come out of nowhere. Mor's preference for women that comes out in book 3 really does feel like where did this come from? Because she's set up to be in almost a love triangle with Azriel and Cassian that looks like it's going to resolve with her being with Azriel when Cassian meets Nesta. But then that gets all thrown out the window when Sarah J. Maas changes her mind and is deciding to set him up with Elaine, who she originally set up with Lucian. It feels like she doesn't know what to do with these characters. And then all of that gets thrown out the window again in A Court of Frost and Starlight when it seems to be setting Azriel up with Gwen. So all of this is just, what? She can't make up her mind what she's doing with these characters at all. The Valkyries. Why didn't Moore talk about fighting with the Valkyries in book 3 when she's talking about fighting with the war? Why did that not even come out until book 4? Lucian turning out to be Helian's son, after in book 1, Moss goes into a pretty big deal about how much he looks like Baron, who's not his father. But this is an attempt at misdirection. This is just, she's changed her mind and is retconning, and it's creating all of these plot holes. Now, here's the big one. Here's the one that is big enough to drive a truck through. And it's Feyre's pregnancy and how risky it really was. It's a big subplot of A Court of Silver Flames, and it's holier than Swiss cheese. I ended up taking myself down a rabbit hole in my own mind of trying to figure out Fey reproductive biology to try and make it make sense. So we're told that the major issue is that Feyre's baby is part Illyrian and it has wings. Those wings are very bony and won't deform well during the birth. Illyrian women have a specially shaped pelvis to accommodate this, but Feyre is high Fey. The baby won't be able to pass through her birth canal, so the labor will cause them to both die. Okay, that makes sense, right? Kind of does. Except we have a society with magical healing that is so sophisticated that it can heal 2 sets of wings that have been completely shredded so that they are usable again with no negative effects, all while constantly talking about how delicate wing structures are, to the point where when Emery shows up in book 4 and she's had her wings clipped, it's become this thing like they can't fix it. But they completely put Cassian and Azriel's wings back together at least twice throughout the whole rest of the series. Now, all of a sudden, all of that healing magic that they used to rebuild all these delicate wing structures suddenly is completely useless when there's a C-section. There is a scene right after one of the battles where a character is basically disemboweled and he's healed perfectly. So he's up and walking the next day. But a C-section is almost universally fatal? Make that make sense, please. Feyre's a shapeshifter. Like, that's the thing that she's learned to do. In fact, that's how the baby ended up with wings, is because she was in Illyrian form when the baby was conceived. At least that's what we're told. But they tell her that she can't shift into an Illyrian form for the birth because that might hurt the baby. But it's gonna die if she doesn't anyway. So why did they not tell her and let her try that? More nails in the coffin that there is a lack of subtext in Sarah J. Maas's writing. It just doesn't seem to be there. So what does Sarah J. Maas have to say about her characters in her own words? So in 2017, she told Cosmopolitan magazine that chapter 55 of A Court of Mist and Fury was the culmination of not just Rhys and Feyre's romantic relationship, but a lot of the plot points that have come out, and it was a big moment of healing for both of them. It was a very emotional thing for me to write. She also said, I wanted readers to experience book 1 with Tamlin and his controlling alpha male behavior and be like, oh, it's kind of the norm, and fall in love with him the way Feyre does, not blindly, but accepting that that's how things are. So then in book 2, when Rhys comes along and Feyre has her own journey, they can look back at book 1 and see all those moments where things kind of got brushed over by Feyre weren't exactly okay. Right there, she's telling you that Feyre and Tamlin's relationship was bad and was supposed to be bad and was purposely depicted that way, and that it was a direct contrast to what Feyre's relationship with Rhys was going to be like and how much better it was going to be. She also says it was a big moment of healing. The Rhysand as a villain theory kind of relies on the fact that, or a lot of what Rhysand was saying in chapter 55 was a lie, but you don't call a moment where another character is lying through his teeth a healing moment for both of them. So when Moss was a guest on the Smart Bitches Trashy Books podcast, she made some more comments about how she writes relationships. She says, Rhys wasn't specifically inspired by my husband, but I think that I was able to understand that kind of relationship and have Feyre and Rhys develop that kind of relationship because of what I am so blessed to have in my life. If Feyre's entire relationship with Rhys is essentially a lie, why would Moss be saying she is blessed to have a relationship that is a lie? She also says, I think I'm able to write about that kind of relationship because that's the kind of relationship I have with my husband, where he is so incredibly, I'm going to cry talking about this, but he's so incredibly supportive of me and my career, but also me as a human being. And I mean, I couldn't do any of what I do without him. Again, here she's saying that she writes about relationships that are like her own, that are these amazing relationships that give her the support that she needs to do what she needs to do, which is what we see Rhysand doing in his relationship with Feyre in A Court of Thorns and Roses, regardless of how well he actually does it or not. The last thing she said on that particular podcast was, I think that's part of the appeal of Rhys, is that he's there for Feyre. He understands what she's going through. He wants her to have her own life with her own passions, and maybe subconsciously bits of my own relationship worked their way into that. I haven't analyzed every single thing that Rhys and Feyre have done and compared them to my own life, but yeah, I think it ultimately just stems from the fact that I'm fortunate enough to have this marvelous man in my life that has allowed me to look at relationships like Rhys and Feyre's and write them. And I love that people are obsessed with Rhys because I'm obsessed with Rhys. She's flat out saying here, she has a relationship like this in her life and it's wonderful. If she was going to yank the rug out from under the reader and turn Rhysand into the villain, why would she be saying that this is the kind of relationship I have in my life and it's awesome? She's telling us he's not trying to control her. He wants her to have her own life. These are not the things you say if you're setting up a third act betrayal. She also has said that she writes happy endings, that she likes reading books with happy endings. In an interview with Time in 2024, she said, my books have happy endings. They're supposed to be hopeful. That same year, she also told Today, if books don't have romance in them, it's like, I usually make it up. I'm like, okay, then they all fall in love and they're all happy and they all have 1,000 children. So again, she's telling us that the happily ever afters that she's writing in her books really are happily ever afters. And if you look at her other works, there is a distinct lack of good guy betrayals in her writing. She just doesn't do it. She's actually more likely to do the opposite and reveal that a bad guy is the good guy. So Rhysand is the most obvious, and it's him we've been talking about, but she does this with Jurian in A Court of Wings and Ruin when it's revealed that he's been playing the King of Hybern the whole time. She also does it with Tamlin because he has that redemption arc in A Court of Wings and Ruin when he helps Feyre and Asriel escape Hybern's camp with Elaine and Briar. In Crescent City, big spoiler for Crescent City if you haven't read it. So in Crescent City, Cormac, Lydia, and Bastian are all revealed to actually be good guys. She's not going to pull the rug out from under us just to make Rhysand the villain after already doing the bad guy to good guy switch. Based on the author's patterns of writing and her own words, this villain theory is really starting to lose a lot of traction. Why does it persist then? What is going on here that this theory even exists? Why is it there? And this is the point that I've been kind of leading up to with all of these videos. People are doing some pretty complicated mental gymnastics to find reasons that this theory is true. So why are they doing it? And the answer is actually pretty simple, and it's kind of sad. The answer is shame. They're reading these series, they're seeing all of these problematic issues with its portrayals of toxic characters that are intended to be romantic ideals, its lack of narrative critique of non-consent, and it makes people uncomfortable, as it should. But they realize that they're enjoying this story that doesn't validate this discomfort by doing that narrative critique we talked about. they're starting to look for some way to try and fix it and to validate it in their own heads. So they start looking for this convoluted theory to explain it all. And unfortunately, there isn't one. Really, it's just bad writing. There is nothing wrong with loving a flawed story. We can acknowledge the issues that a book has while still admitting that we enjoyed the story it told. Because that story is a work of fiction and these characters don't really exist outside the pages we're reading. So we don't necessarily have to hold them to the same moral standard to which we hold people in the real world. I don't see an issue with that at all, as long as we as readers recognize it and acknowledge it. We don't have to jump through a bunch of mental hoops to justify loving a book exactly as it's written. It's okay to say, Rhysand is hot, but I wouldn't want my partner to actually act like that. It's okay to say, things in this book clashed with my own personal morality, but it was still a fun story that I enjoyed reading. Sometimes what's on the page is exactly what's intended, and we can love it for what it is, even if it isn't perfect. And that's the point that I've been leading up to through all of these videos, and why I did this is to say, go enjoy your imperfect stories. Don't be ashamed of enjoying a book that isn't a paragon of your particular morality. Now, please, go forth and enjoy something just because it is.